Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I'm going to turn your attention next to a subject that is becoming something of a hardy perennial on the programme, but which has assumed a, well, for me at least, a rather more personal flavour than I've previously managed to address. 0 hours contracts, and the news today that the number of people on them now in Britain is nearing 1 million. That's a significant part of, isn't it, of the workforce. Let me get it, 910,000 to be precise. This from the Office for National Statistics, gone up by about 10%. About 110,000 is more than 10%, isn't it, since the same period in 2015. That's about 14% actually higher, and it's up 30% on the year before. So do you remember when we started talking about this? And we found quite a few people who were comfortable with it or quite liked it. And we used them to sort of calm our fears that it wasn't sweeping the nation and being used to effectively strip workers of the most fundamental of rights. And I could still hold on to that hope if it wasn't for that number there. 30% up since 2014. 14% up since 2015. This is the numbers in 2016. Obviously, they can't measure 2017 yet because it's only 2 months old. And look, I am conscious of the fact that there are things that make it hard to imagine what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes. What you need in order to do that is empathy. And empathy is going out of fashion faster than flares. It's part of the reason why you get so much rhetoric about lovies. I don't know if you've noticed this. Why can't actors shut up? Why can't artists shut up? Why do all these historians have to tell us what they think about Brexit? Why do all these economists or historians of Nazi Germany have to keep talking to us about Donald Trump? The reason why, and they're not all bad people, but they're a bit dumb. The reason why dumb right-wingers hate lovies and artists and actors and Lily Allen and Simon Sharma and whoever it may be is that art feeds the imagination. And imagination is the primary prerequisite for empathy. So if you don't use your imagination ever, you're never going to be able to imagine what it's like to be crossing the Mediterranean in a leaking dinghy because you're so frightened of what you've left behind that you're risking whatever lies ahead. That's empathy, right? Empathy is also, for example, listening to some of the callers we took in the last hour and not saying, shut up, get over it, you lost, but saying, oh my God, I'm not going to be affected by that at all. But if I was, I'd be just as worried as Herman and Jamie and all the others. That's empathy. Empathy also has to go the other way sometimes. And this is where I always make the distinction between liars and people who believe lies. So if you live in an area where there isn't any immigration and you've never met a Muslim, but every time you open your newspaper, you're being told that they're all rapists and murderers, of course you're going to be frightened. I have empathy for you as well. But my empathy for you leads me to try and show you that there isn't a monster under the bed and there isn't a dragon in the next town that's immolating all the residents. I'll show you proof and truth of that. Okay? That's the demonstration of empathy being a two-way street. They hate the idea. They hate it. Hate it, hate it, hate it. The idea that if you use your imagination, you listen to J.K. Rowling or whoever it may be, then you will be a lot closer to being able to imagine what it would be like to be the victim of a ban on visiting America or an absence of certainty on whether you're going to be able to carry on living on the street you've lived in for the last 20 years for the next 20 years. That's empathy, right? 0 hours contracts. It's tough. And I'm going to explain to you why my empathy for those people has increased slightly, but I'm going to sound a bit stupid. I'm going to sound a bit ridiculous, and I'm certainly going to expose myself to all the usual accusations of champagne socialism and middle-class bubbles. The reason is that I have had to take 3 or 4 days off work. I've had to turn down 3 or 4 shifts in order to go to hospital because I've got a gammy eye. And one of them actually wasn't to go to hospital. I couldn't do a TV gig because I literally couldn't. I mean, I looked like what's he called, the Harry Potter character, Mad Eye. I can't remember, but anyway, it looked shocking. It was right blown up. One of the great joys of working on the radio with a gob like mine and a face like mine. It becomes doubly valuable when your eye swells up like an onion. So that was one reason I had to turn down work, because I was ill, physically disfigured. And the other 3 shifts here I've had to turn down when you've had the pleasure of Matt Fry's company or others, is because the hospital appointments at the NHS hospital I go to for the clinic I needed to attend and the X-ray I had to have last week, they were all in the morning, and I had no negotiation. That was it. I had to take it. So when I do my invoices at the end of this month, there'll be quite a big gap in what I normally earn. There'll be 4 or 5 paychecks shy out of a total of between 20 and 22 or 23. I was going to redress this by standing in for Matt Fry tomorrow morning, but I couldn't get a babysitter, so you'll have the pleasure of someone else's company. Matt, who I should mention, picked up an astonishing award this week. The Royal Television Society TV Journalist of the Year has gone to my colleague, I'd like to say friend, but I haven't met the fella yet, to Matt Fry for the amazing work he does over at Channel 4 News. And you know, I mean, it's swimming against the tide of some of our appointments at the moment, but an intelligent, informed, decent, brilliant journalist on the LBC roster is something we should be shouting from the rooftops. So consider that shouted. But it means that I can now imagine what it would be like if I was 4 or 5 shifts down on a month and didn't have enough money to pay my bills, because it's taken a slight chunk out of my income. So it means that, you know, I probably won't take the kids to Pizza Express this weekend. First world problems, get your violin out. And if it meant I couldn't take the kids to school because I couldn't afford my fare, if it meant that I couldn't take the kids away on something I'd promised to them because I'm 4 or 5 shifts down on the month, then I'd have proper problems, which I don't have. I stress again, champagne socialist, politics of envy. 0 hours contracts don't even let you do that, do they? You can't even be certain that you're going to get the 20 shifts at the end of the month, even if you're fit and well. As I understand it, you get told on a Monday morning, if you're lucky, whether or not you're needed that week. If you're unlucky, you get told whether you're or not you're needed that day. They still sound pretentious, but I'm standing by it. This isn't tongue-in-cheek or anything like that. The William Hogarth of our time, there's a cartoonist, a couple of cartoonists, one does the words, one does the pictures, called Barney Farmer and Lee Healy, who do the Drunken Bakers strip in the Viz magazine, Viz comic, which if you're of my age and you stopped buying it 20 years ago, it's well worth starting to buy it again. They did a strip last year. I told you about it at the time. And this is what art does, you see. This is why fascists hate artists. It makes you think about the world in a different way. It means that you don't believe everything they tell you, and you certainly don't believe them when they tell you that anything that makes them look bad must be fake news or lies. So these lads did a strip about a fella he bumped into his mate. He'd gone into work and effectively gets laid off while he's there. So you get, what I want is calls from you to tell me how widespread this practice is. But you're at work and you get told, oh, we don't need you for a couple of hours. You can clock off, but don't go away because we might need you later. So my middle class hell of being 4 shifts down on the month is as nothing compared to what it would be like to turn up at LBC every morning, needing the money and being told, oh, well, just hang around for a bit. I'll let you know in an hour or so whether or not you're going to get any paid work today. That's absolutely incredible. And it's happening, it would appear, on a bigger and bigger and bigger scale. Then you have the threat that is held over you, the sword of Damocles, if you will, that comes with telling the employer you're not available for work, which is where my recent medical experiences come in. Because if I needed the money badly enough, I wouldn't have gone to the hospital, would I? I wouldn't have gone to the hospital. And I don't know at what point I would have had to, but do you know, I saw people there in the waiting room, and some of them really did look as if they'd waited until they literally couldn't see before they'd sought medical help. Don't go all snowflakey on me or anything like that. I'm not suggesting that the world is an eternal money tree and everyone should be given a cheque at birth that will sustain them for the rest of their natural. I'm just asking you to imagine what it would be like to be so ill that you couldn't properly function, but so skint that you couldn't take the day off work to go to the doctors. And unless I've got the wrong end of the stick completely with regard to 0 hours contracts, this is what we're doing. 0345 6060973. Let's take empathy out of the equation and replace it with evidence. What's your life like on a 0 hours contract? And by all means, give me the upside, the sunny upside as well, because I haven't given you the most scary statistic of all yet. I've been hanging on to it, because who have you got in your mind now when you think of someone on a 0 hours contract? Who are you thinking of? You're thinking of a spotty youth at JD Sport, right? You're thinking of a youngster who actually quite likes the fact that he can work 3 days and stay in bed for the other 2. Yeah, I am. I'm thinking of the fella on the bus in Barney Farmer's cartoon in Viz, who literally turns up and gets told, no, we don't need you now, but hang around, we might need you later. And then he goes home on the bus later and tells his mate, I've earned nothing today. I'm down on the day. I'm down on the day because I've had to pay my bus fare. I'm thinking of them. So how do you feel about the fact that just under half of the increase in people on 0 hours contracts in 2016 are aged between, go on, 55 and 64. 55 and 64. People who've already put in an almighty shift in circumstances far superior to the ones they're forced to work under today. But I'm speculating again. Maybe it's fine. Maybe it's easy. Maybe there isn't a significant swathe of our population now who are too frightened to go sick because if they do, they can't pay their bills. Only one way to find out. Hit the numbers now. We'll talk. We'll ring you straight back. Don't worry about that if you are sort of on your uppers. 0345 6060973. Because at risk of sounding like Cassandra again, I told you this would happen. You allow the unemployed to be treated like scum by the usual suspects on radio, on TV and in newspapers. You allow benefits claimants to be cast as sort of subhuman in this way. It doesn't stop. It just moves slightly up the ladder until we apply similar pejoratives and similar rhetoric to people who've got a job but don't earn enough because they're not working hard enough. It's their fault. They don't need protecting. Down with union. And you end up in a country where over half of the people, I would argue forced, because there wouldn't be a lot of choice involved in this, to sign a 0 hours contract in 2016 were aged between 55 and 64. And that breaks my heart. I don't quite understand how it could leave anybody's untouched. Let's find out. Sell it to me. Tell me why I'm barking up the wrong tree here. 0345 6060973. Or, more simply, just tell me about your life on a 0 hours contract and whether that very simple suggestion I made a moment ago, if I earned a fraction of what I do earn, I wouldn't have gone to the hospital to get my eye looked at. And as it turned out, things aren't that bad. But that could have led me to lose my sight in some circumstances. And you don't have to go that far back in Britain to rediscover circumstances where that was commonplace. If you ended up in debt, you ended up in jail. If you ended up in jail, you could never pay your debt. 0 hours contracts. I've got lots of phone lines free on this because I've gone off on one as usual. So don't leave me hung out to dry after the travel news. Call me now and tell me what your life is like on 0 hours. And if you're in that 55 to 64-year-old category and you're a little bit stunned to find yourself listening to this and you're a little bit stunned to find yourself in that category of citizen, well, listen, I will treat you with dignity for as long as I can, even when your country and your government and your employer are not. Because that is a British value. It's 11:16. Nearly 1 million people on 0 hours contracts, up 30% over 2 years, and perhaps most surprisingly, category seeing one of the biggest rises up until nearly half of this latest increase, people aged 55 to 64. It won't be quite as bad as I've portrayed it, because when I was a student, I liked the kind of work that allowed you to kind of pick and choose your hours according to what else was going on. But if you've got overheads and responsibilities and you don't know at the beginning of the month or the week or even the day whether you're going to be able to meet them or not, I don't quite understand how my country has come to this. Do you? Amma is in Croydon. Amma, what would you like to say?
Hi there. I'm 29 years old and I'm doing my masters. So I was made redundant, but and that's why I decided to do my masters. But now I'm working for a 0 hour contract for alongside the local authority. And you know, some months in a good month, I can earn a decent amount of money. But you know, recently I've had a lot of cancellations, and the nature of the work is that when the sessions are cancelled, you don't get paid.
What sort of notice do you get for the cancellation?
I mean, it could be anything up from a week before, a day before, or sometimes on that day. Last week, for example, I turned up to the contact and the parents just didn't turn up to see their children.
What do you do, if you don't mind me asking?
No problem. I'm a supervised contact. I'm a contact supervisor, sorry.
So you are there when children in care have access meetings with their own parents?
Exactly.
And you're on a 0 hours contract?
Yes. And in this particular case, the parent didn't turn up, so the child was sent home. But, you know, the contact was supposed to be for 4 hours, and I only got paid for 1 hour because it was cancelled. So, you know, it really has had an effect.
I'm going to ask you a question to which I know the answer. I think I know the answer. And I may have misunderstood this text here from Matt, who says, any idea why the political demonisation of 0 hours contracts has failed so miserably to put people off? I hope he's either being sarcastic or silly, because when I ask you why you put up with this, you tell me because...
Well, I mean, because the nature of the job is in line with my career path, and that it's a choice.
But surely, I mean, the question is, why are you putting up with that short notice? Why don't you get a job in the same sector where you don't have to put up with being cancelled at an hour's notice?
I mean, as it stands, it suits me because I'm not contracted to, you know, say my hours aren't rigid. So it's kind of like agency.
No, I understand that. But if you wanted to do the same job and know every morning how many hours you were going to do, could you find that job?
Not really, because in this it's such a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's such a
fluid.
Yes, fluid. Exactly. It's very fluid. But
I mean, I'm old-fashioned. For me, you sign a contract that guarantees you X amount of work. And that's what you would call your basic. I don't know if you've ever worked on commission, but you really think long and hard before you take a job where your basic won't meet your overheads and you know, your barest overheads. And then the commission hopefully gives you your luxuries and your fripperies and your lifestyle. But when you take a job on commission with no basic or with not enough basic to meet your bills, you're taking your life in your hands, and you're doing it in a job that is actually vocational and about caring for vulnerable children.
Yes, exactly.
Wowza.
It's very, I mean, it's tough. So, I mean, for me personally, I've had to opt in taking a second job to combat that. So when contact goes down, I can, you know, jump on other shifts in the same area, but...
Yeah, and that means you're doing lots of unpaid work, finding or unpaid hours, unpaid schlepping, finding the alternatives that you can then go off and do when the people who should be paying you a wage have told you at an hour's notice that they can't pay you a wage, and you've got bills to meet and people to pay, and you need to get the wage. Okay, right. Evidence for the prosecution, I suppose. There will be some evidence for the defence. The idea that retired people or older people who are semi-retired quite enjoy this. There would be some people that enjoy it. I would have enjoyed it when I was a student. But the idea that your entire livelihood is on a sort of 24-hour rotation, it's empathy. It frightens me. I imagine what it would be like, and I'd be scared. I wouldn't sleep at night. I can't pay the bill. I can't pay the rent. Well, God, please, every time the phone rings. That's what it'd be, wouldn't it? I don't know. Sarah's in Manchester. Sarah, what can you tell us?
Hi. Should I say good morning? I work in care and obviously have a 0 hours contract.
Why'd you say, forgive me, why'd you say obviously?
No, sorry, because when I spoke with your colleague, that's why. I beg your pardon.
So obviously, because you phoned the phone in about 0 hour contracts. I thought you were sort of suggesting that everybody in the care sector would be on a 0 hours contract. My bad.
No, but that's the premise for a lot of 0 hour contracts are ruled by care companies.
Yes.
I was promised at my interview that I would have 50 hours a week. That obviously fluctuates via, obviously people will die or people go into hospital. But just this week, I've found that I've had 7.5 hours taken away from me and handed over to one call has gone and the other has gone to other colleagues. So that takes a vast amount of money away from me, which again impacts on my abilities to deal with.
And what sort of notice do you get on that?
I didn't have, only when I looked at my rota. So rotas come out on a Friday. You get it via email, check it. And because I've been away on holiday, I just had a look yesterday morning to discover that I've lost a lot of calls.
So that's 7.5 times your hourly rate missing from your pay packet at the end of this week.
£60 a week, which is quite considerable for me.
Of course it is.
So, and it's an ongoing issue because I'm also available for 12 hours a day.
Do you have to be available for 12 hours a day?
I'm a full-timer, so I chose to do that.
Yes.
With a couple of hours off in between for the school runs. But you're expected to be available when they haven't given you that work. You have to be available so they can ring you up at any time.
This is the thing I find remarkable. This is the Uberization of the workforce. And when
It's been like it for years, though.
Okay, has it really? We just haven't noticed because you don't have a very loud voice in your profession.
Oh, no, that's what a lot of people say. They can't hear me.
Well,
You certainly need to deal with older people who are hard of hearing. I have to shout.
I didn't mean you don't have a very loud voice personally. I meant the caring sector doesn't have a very loud voice in terms of...
Are frightened because you sign a contract and you try and adhere to the contract, but it's very, because of the rules and regulations only apply to each individual company. CQC can set out a regulation, but it's up to the individual company how they regulate. So it's not fast.
So there's no uniformity across the board, and I suppose with so many private sector agencies providing staff, inevitably they end up conducting business in different ways. How? I mean, I don't want to upset you, but how? I mean, what's the worst it's been when you've ended a week with considerably less money than you were expecting to have? What are the things that you can't pay or you can't do? Do you end up going into debt, or do you just end up not turning on the heating?
Debt per se, but I haven't paid my water bill.
There you go.
For some time, but I'm using card and key for my electricity and gas. I'm behind on my rent because at present they're doing not an investigation, they're checking how much I earn because they say they haven't heard from me. So it's a sort of thing via HMRC,
yes,
via the council. So they want full rent, but I can continue at present to pay my normal amount.
Yes.
But so I'm always behind anyway. I can't catch up.
And that's quite that's a sapping place to be, isn't it? It saps your emotional energy.
It's not nice, no. And being called up, you've just got in from work and then, can you go and do this call? I have virtually no time. And yet then I've suddenly got lots of gaps where I'm not being paid.
Sarah, I wish you well. I whenever I do subjects like this, I find myself almost signing off with every call, wishing I could do more and admitting that I can't, but I get that out there. Anybody wondering why this happens, it's really simple. Because what Sarah just described, and this is how it works. This is how it worked in the 19th century. This is how it's going to work in the second half of the 21st century if we're not careful. What Sarah just described is vastly superior to the alternative. I'm going to do something a bit different in the final hour of the programme today. You know, when I bang on about grey areas and how it's so sad to see Britain becoming so binary, so black and white about everything, and the effort that's put into it is unbelievable. What are the stories today? I think there's a university that said some words are unacceptable, so just ignore it, or let the university worry about it. It's like the old arguments about political correctness gone mad. But of course, if you stick it in the Daily Mail, you give it a megaphone and you shout, "Oh, you can't say, what is it, mankind?" I think in the newspaper, you can't say mankind anymore. Who cares? It's silly. It's silly. I'm not going to spend my life getting angry about other people being silly. Oh, it's shutting down debates. Political correctness. No, it isn't. It's a newspaper making money out of enraging you about something that doesn't affect you in any way whatsoever. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. It's all over the shop at the moment, these sort of stories. It's only recently there's the penny dropped for me. Remember the Cecil Rhodes statue in Oxford? A bunch of students who objected to Cecil Rhodes' sort of very exploitative past. He was one of the back end of the empire pioneers who arrived in Africa and filled his pockets with diamonds that probably should have been shared out more fairly among Africans. You have a valid point to object to him still being revered in college quadrangles. Does it affect me in Kidderminster or Chiswick? Of course it doesn't. Let the students have a row about it. Honestly, it's what students do. They row about everything. Hypersensitive students, of course they are. It goes with the territory. But then you stick it in the Daily Mail and you give it a megaphone and everybody's got a view on it. All of this stuff about political correctness. If I ever get round to doing a PhD, I'll tell you what it's going to be. I'm going to track the amount of coverage given to the original action, i.e. the students who wanted to do the statue or the university that wants to remove certain words from the equation. See how big that was. Like, what would it be? A poster on a notice board, for example. So that's on one side of the scales. The actual thing is on that side. So the poster on a notice board saying, or a petition saying, down with this statue. So you put that on one side of the scale. And then on the other side of the scale, you put all the media coverage that's designed to make us all furious. Whoa! Straight up, isn't it? Like that. And you sit there sometimes thinking, well, hang on a minute. The only reason people are getting furious about this is because they're getting told to get furious about it. And you throw in some of the usual things like, oh, I don't know, there's a Muslim involved or an immigrant or a gay. And say, whoa, it's right. So originally it's a poster on a notice board in a university common room saying something like, I think we should ban the Daily Mail. Or I think we should ban this and ban that, or we should take down that. That's fine. I went to university. I remember those guys. They were a bit strange. Didn't get out much, lived it, and the rest of us didn't. And now, every single time one of these people stands up and says, I think dreadlocks should be banned because they're cultural appropriation, it makes the front page of the Telegraph. And no wonder everybody's so mad all the time. So we'll keep an eye on that for you. Point is, in a non-binary world, sometimes things that you just know aren't right feel right. And that's what we're doing in the next hour. The guys they're called Dark Justice, and they go online to catch potential paedophiles. And then they hand them over to the police and they've got convictions. They've got notches on their belt. And I think they're great. And I know I shouldn't. So I want to meet them. And so can you. So we'll talk about it for half an hour and then we'll meet them at 12:30 and they'll be disguised and you know, it'll all be quite covert. And then we'll find out what we think about after we've heard from them. But I just look at the world at the moment. Do you know both of my schools are in the news this week? My prep school and my public school, both in the news this week for the usual reason. That's why guys like that earn my respect, admiration and gratitude. But I know they shouldn't because they're essentially taking the law into their own hands. So that's going to be an amazing hour. Let's get back to the, grim in a different way, the 0 hours contract. Some of the texts are astonishing. And something I didn't even know. People working, I'm not going to name the supermarket because they're not here to defend themselves, but Eden tells me that he's just found out all the staff in his local one are contracted for 7.5 hours a week. They all want to do more and usually do, but there are no guarantees. So would that wouldn't count as a 0 hours contract? I didn't even know that. That's why we do what we do, isn't it? So that they won't even be on the list because there's a part of me that thinks 910,000 seems quite low. But that's a 7.5 hours contract. So they're not. Is that right? That wouldn't go down as 0 hours. In the same way that a self-employed person who hasn't earned butt kiss for a month doesn't go down as unemployed. And they're getting away with it. Why? Well, we're all getting cross about a poster on a blackboard at a university in Bristol. Janet's in Hainault. Janet, what would you like to say?
Morning, Jay.
Hello, Janet.
I'm just incensed with this 0 hours contract. For some people, it works. I mean, I'm working, but my brother isn't, and I'm seeing it from his point of view. And you know, we're living it as a family, and I feel so sorry for him because he goes for jobs and he gets it, and then he works for a couple of weeks, goes in on the morning. You're not required today. Doesn't get paid for the hour when it takes him to get there, and it's a 0 hour contract. I think it's just immoral.
How old is he?
He's 52, going to be 53 this
year. This makes me want to punch someone. I mean, look, I don't know your brother. He might not be a very nice bloke, Janet. I don't want to do you any of it. But I just have... You always think of your own... I mean, for that... I mean, 7 years older than me, but somehow in my mind, I'm thinking of my late father being exposed to that sort of practice. The idea that, you know, and he got made redundant, and if he had to just go out, he's a proud man, he wants to work. And to turn up and be told, probably by a 24-year-old, that you're not needed today.
Exactly. And, they're not curt with it. I mean, they're just so sharp with it. And he says he wants to work, and he says, well, do you need me tomorrow? We'll call you. They don't call,
Mate.
And it's just, what I don't like about it, it's so demoralising for some people. And I think he's living his life on the edge. And because he's on 0 hours contract, he's lost his house, so therefore he's got to move back home with our parents. Lucky that we've got our parents, but he can move back there. But God Almighty, he'd starve if he didn't have family, and
And if he ends up starving, which he won't because he's got you and your parents, but if he did and had to visit a food bank, there'd be a Tory MP standing outside telling him it's a lifestyle choice and he should stop smoking 40 a day.
Exactly.
And there'd be some plum from my profession shouting from the rooftops that this is Skyver versus Striver and he should work harder and get a better job.
Well, exactly. And I think what I'm worried about, not him per se, but
Sure.
I'm worried about people who they try, they really try to go and get a job, and they get something, they get their pride back. 'Cause I remember when he got a job, the pride of him that taking his sandwiches to work, and every night he got it ready. He's never late, and then he goes in and he says, "Oh, no work today. Go home. We'll call you," and they don't. And it's like, well, you're in limbo. What do? Do you try and look for another job, or do you wait for that phone call? And then when he tries looking for another job, obviously on his CV, it looks like he's got, he's been moving around loads and loads of different places. And at the moment, I'm really concerned about him and other people in that position because, a bigger man could, unfortunately, commit suicide. And we know that, the people over 40, men particularly, they're more prone to be committed.
No, you're not. You've described a sort of hellish hamster wheel that you don't even have the privilege of knowing you're going to be able to get on every morning. I just can't quite... And I can't say politics aside because this is pure politics, isn't it? But how do you think how has this happened? Is it just the kind of demonisation of the unions coupled with the demonisation of the unemployed means that he has no choice?
Yeah, absolutely. Demonisation of the unions, definitely. And the amount of people that are unemployed. Employers, fair enough, they can pick and choose. But, sometimes,
But they've always been able to pick and choose. The point is that they weren't allowed to take the mickey because you'd have a representative on the trade floor, on the shop floor to look after you. And the contract would be something that the union negotiated with the employer. And there are good employers. I mean, it's not quite grag grind yet, but it's... Oh, Janet, I wish your brother well, I really do. And, all right, here it is. I've just remembered. See, I said to Axel during the break, because we talk a little in the breaks about topics that are unfolding, I said, this is the big part of Trump and Brexit that a lot of people miss. A lot of people in my profession who don't have the pleasure of speaking to people like Janet every day. This is the point they miss. If you think about the life that was described there, or the earlier caller talking about turning up for a 4-hour shift, only getting paid for an hour, how are you going to pay your bills at the end of the month? Can't pay my water bill. And you live in a degree of comfort, whatever your politics are. You can't quite understand Trump and Brexit. But, of course, people think it can't be any worse than this. So I may as well jump off the cliff. I may as well roll the dice. It can't be any worse than this. Look at my circumstances. This is rubbish. Then you factor in the little person whispering in your ear, it's not your boss in his Bentley that's responsible for you being skint. It's that Polish fella over there. It's all his fault. And that works too. So you vote just for anything that's different from this. And then you meet the economists who are still in favour of Brexit, and they say, well, one of the great things about leaving is that we'll be able to get rid of a lot of regulations and become even more competitive, which translates roughly, for people who voted because they didn't think it could get any worse than this, as, yes, it bloody well can. Essay's in Greenwich. Essay, what would you like to say?
Hello.
Hello, Essay. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Hi. Before I go to the topic, I just want to say I'm a huge fan.
Well, you're very kind. I'm a big fan of yours now. You're very kind.
Yeah, and it's my sister that sent that tweet last week.
So saying it was her first ever tweet, and she got on it just to say hello to me and tell me how much her sister likes me.
Yeah.
Well, that was that. If only every tweet was like that, Essay, I'd probably never be on Twitter. What did you ring in about today? It's not just for that.
Okay, yeah, so back to the topic. So I'm currently working with an agency, and I'm on 0-hour contracts. I decided to go for that contract because I've got 2 children, and it's just really convenient for me. The downside is I can turn up for work after travelling about 2 hours to get to the place of work and be told there and then that they're overbooked and they don't need me.
Can't you ring before you leave? I'm just being sort of annoying.
No, because they send me a confirmation to say that your shift has been booked. So this happened to me last week, Friday. I was booked in to work from 8 p.m. to 8:30 in the morning. So I got to my place of work only to be told, after delaying me to about 10 o'clock, to say they've got nowhere to move me to and they're overbooked and they don't need me. So I ended up getting home at about almost 1 in the morning. And they only paid me for 2 hours.
Well,
£44.
I would like to apologise to you, because I think that I would, if I had time, I'd get very angry about the way you're being treated. But I'm at the moment in Britain, led by the media, I'm too busy getting angry about a university issuing guidance on what words are and are not acceptable, a gay character in Beauty and the Beast, and a Muslim fella who's suggested that it might be quite a good idea to see more brown faces on the telly so that other brown people don't feel marginalised in society. You understand, these are the things we really should be getting cross about, I say. I shouldn't be getting cross about the fact you're working in circumstances pretty close to indentured labour. A 2-hour journey, and you get there and they say, no, can you go home, please?
Yeah, literally. I got there and they told me, sorry, we're overbooked. I don't know who booked you. And I showed them the confirmation and they said, oh, no, sorry, we don't need you. We're fully staffed. So I had to turn back. And there's been times that I remember there was this Christmas just gone, I couldn't make it in for a night shift. And I had to write a statement as to why I couldn't come in for that night shift, because I couldn't get childcare. And it's okay for them to cancel my shift.
But not okay for you to... No, of course. That's it, isn't it? That's where we are. 11:48. I say, I feel for you. You know I do. I really do. And I was joking about all the other stuff that I'm too busy being angry about. 11:46. The answer is really simple. So many people say, I had no idea this was going on. Why don't we know about it? The answer's simple. Open your newspaper, see what you've been told to get cross about today. You know, what's the latest example of political correctness gone mad, or the Liberals taking over? Yeah, I'm going to get really, really cross about the vocabulary employed by a university department, while my neighbours are driving 2 hours to work to be told they're not needed today, so can you go home, please? And no, we're not going to reimburse you for the petrol. 910,000 on a 0 hours contract. Some of them will be happy. Of course they will. Then the other thing we've unearthed today, people on a 7.5 hour contract or a 10-hour contract or a 12-hour contract expecting to work 40 hours a week, hoping to work 40 hours a week, but not being registered as being on a 0 hours contract because they're guaranteed 7 hours a week. How do you pull it off? It's so easy. You render the unemployed the Untermensch. You render the unemployed somehow inferior. You demonise them. You castigate them. You stigmatise them. Everyone is therefore... How many people, when they ring me, say, I've never claimed any benefits, I've never been... It's like you have to declare it. Like that. I lose my job. First thing I'm doing is going down the labour exchange, getting back some of the money I've paid in over the years. First thing I'm going to do. But people are embarrassed by that now. It's successfully achieved. Embarrassment, shame, stigmatisation, unemployed. Don't tell anyone, unemployed. Everyone will think that I'm taking the mickey. Everyone will think that I'm swinging the lead. And then you couple that with the removal of rights from the workers. That's legislation, by the way, that won't get reported in the newspapers that are demonising the unemployed. They won't write big editorials about how awful it is that people are turning up at work and being turned away, because the people that have got shares in the newspapers will probably have shares in the companies that are doing that. Same people. That's how you do it. And then you end up with caller after caller after caller describing to you circumstances that are pretty close to Victorian, but not sounding as angry as they should, because the alternative is even worse than what they've got. You could even, if you wanted to be really depressing, say that the people we're talking to are the lucky ones. At least they got enough money to make a phone call. James is in Dagenham. James, are we painting too bleak a picture?
No, James, it's pretty honest, to be truthful. I've seen it now for 10 years, they're just chipping away at everything. I've been working for agencies for possibly since about 1999. I came down here from Scotland.
Okay.
And when I came down at first, agencies would maybe pay you £1.50, £2 an hour more for the fact that you weren't getting maybe 5 days a week, 6 days a week. So that was the same in the warehouses as well. Even the warehouse guys were maybe getting £1 an hour more than the full-time staff, obviously to put up with the fact that they don't get holiday pay, sick pay, stuff like that. But what's happened in the last kind of 6 or 7 years, the agency people are now on less money than the full-timers, so even taking a holiday or you have to take any time off at all, it's impossible, because you just can't put that little bit of money aside. I mean, my personal circumstances are 2 years ago, my 11-year-old son, he died, and that was on the Sunday morning, on August the 11th, and 7 days later I had to go back to work, because if I didn't go back to work, my rent wasn't going to get paid, electricity wasn't going to get paid, everything. So I had to go back to work and leave my wife in the house on her own, grieving for her child. And it's probably one of the worst things I've ever had to do in my life. And I've lived with that ever since, because I should never have done that, and I should never have to put her through that.
You can't beat yourself up for that.
That was the circumstance.
Because the alternative was even worse, as I just said.
Yeah, but that was it. That's the reality. Your rent doesn't. I mean, people can be. They'll maybe help you out a little bit with the rent. They might let it go for 2 weeks or a month.
Of course.
But at the end of the day, that still has to be paid. The electricity bill has to be paid. Everything has to be paid. And as I said, you've not got that little bit of money you can put by for a rainy day. I mean, I never took a holiday in 5 years. I never took more than any 3 days off in 5 years, because of the fact that I didn't know when I was working. One day you're working at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, next day it's 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm a lorry driver, so you're not getting your sleep pattern.
See, this is what has surprised me, and I'm so sorry for your loss, James. So sorry. The jobs I'm hearing are not the jobs I thought. I thought it was kids in shops, not fathers in lorries. I thought it was kids in shops and burger bars.
I'm 50 years of age. And right now I've got £40 left in my bank account, and I don't get paid again until the 25th of this month. That is it. That is the reality of what's happening here. And as I say, the agencies are still making the money. The companies are still making the money. That
is the point, and that's why the immigration rhetoric is so toxic, because the agencies are still making the money and the companies are still making the money, but there'll be people listening to this who say, it's because of all those Poles driving lorries. It's not. It's because your bosses are taking more of your money than they were ever allowed to do so before.
This is what I've said. I've actually had a go at them. Basically, I says you're just taking advantage here, rather than them. They're still charging their £15 an hour to Mr. Sainsbury's or Tesco or whatever, but that driver, so they get this £12 an hour.
This is what I mean by the Uberization of society, and Uber's quite a latecomer to the party. But the idea that people with money to invest and shares to buy look at someone like you or a black cab driver, and the black cab drivers are still a hell of a lot better off than you are. And I suppose they're on 0 hours contracts, actually, in the sort of traditional self-employed sense of the word, but they don't have a boss who decides when they work like you do. That's the crucial difference we need to understand before we start conflating the two. But oh, man alive, but the idea that you don't know how much you're going to earn in a week.
Yeah, and there's also the thing is, if you say it is busy and you phone them up, say, I can't come in tomorrow, well, that's it. For the next 3 or 4 days, they're not going to call you for any work as a punishment. You know what I mean?
They've got all the power.
They don't know your circumstances, so you might really need to take that day off. So as a punishment, all right, James, next week you're not going to get it.
How hard, and forgive me for the crassness of this question, but how hard is it to get a job that fulfills slightly more traditional patterns, where you're going to do your 8-hour day or your 9-hour day, and you're going to do it every day, and you know exactly where you are and where you stand and what your income will be at the end? We are creating a country in which knowing how much you're going to earn at the end of a month in which you're prepared to work full time is going to make you one of the privileged few.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, in my industry, the driving industry has all gone mostly agency. There's not a lot of companies out there will take on full-time drivers. Or if they do want to take on full-time drivers, it's at wages they were paying 20 years ago, because of the circumstances now, they know they can drop the wages right down.
And yet when we're told that the economy is growing, it means that the people that own the companies are banking more. That's what economic growth means, isn't it? There's more profits, there's more money coming in.
They're still announcing £1 billion profits every year, but the people that are actually doing the work are getting less and less and less. As I said, I've been doing it now for the best part of 20 years, and I know I'm personally making 2/3 of what I was making 10 years ago. I'm making 2/3 of what I was 2006.
Yeah. And that's normal. And yet, I mean, you'll always have a platform here, James, to tell your story on this subject or any other. But generally speaking, where would you go in the British media to find out the reality of this situation? To find out the reality of 0-hour contracts or 7.5-hour contracts? Where would you go? Everyone else, almost every other outlet, too busy telling you to get cross about all sorts of meaningful and trivial things, or making up stuff and selling it to you, while workers, normal people, ordinary people, are being skinned on a scale that I don't think we've ever seen before. And then you factor in Brexit, and what's the big line about why Brexit is going to be good for us? We're going to get rid of all the regulations. We're going to get rid of all the red tape. We're going to make it more competitive. What does that mean? It just means the bosses will be able to keep even more of the money than they've got now. And where's that going to leave James?
How you doing,